Hey, we do have somebody here. Is audio coming through okay? Okay, good. I'm back to using my big microphone, and hopefully it won't mess up this time. But wait and see if anybody else shows up. This was a little bit impromptu on my part, so we'll just see what happens. I'll just regular old live Q&A session. All right, looks like we got a handful of people in here. Hello, Thomas. Anybody have any questions to go ahead and start out with? Just basically free for all tonight on, band or composing or whatever, music questions. What do I think about writing for the synthesizer in a band setting? I do not have a problem with it at all. There's a couple different ways you can use a synthesizer. One is as a replacement for another instrument, typically something like celeste. In fact, I know Hollywood scoring, they use a synthesizer instead of a celeste. I'd be more interested in looking at it for new tone colors, but using a celeste or a synth in wind band is not unheard of. I just at the moment I can't think of anything really off the top of my head, though I do know several pieces that use electronics. I think if you look at something like, what's the piece I'm thinking of? Ecstatic Waters. Who's that by? That's not James Stevenson. That's I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but Ecstatic Waters has a big electronics part in it, complete with full. The score has like speaker setups and everything in there. All right, what else we got? Looks like we're up to about 7 people in here. What do you think about writing for soprano sax and contrabass clarinets and concert band? Considering I have both of those, I can see my soprano sax right now. I've got a contra clarinet in the other room. Stephen Bryant, thank you, Seth. That was answer to Ecstatic Waters. I absolutely love using soprano sax and especially contrabass and contralto clarinets. I think the contra clarinets are virtually essential in a concert band. If money and rarity of instruments weren't issues, what would be your ideal band instrumentation? Band instrumentation is dictated by the music itself. I don't think there is an ideal band instrumentation that you can set for every piece to follow. I have never written 2 pieces of music that use exactly the same instrumentation. I change it every time. It's always depending on what the needs of the music are. Go with the needs of the music first. But back to about using contra clarinets, they are some of the most important instruments that we have in the wind band for supporting the lowest register. I've never felt that tubas are the best solution to having that deep contrabass register, simply because they're too loud. A single tuba can outblow an entire 100-piece orchestra. What will four do in a 50-piece concert band? But the contra clarinets are a great alternative to that. All right, what else we got? Back to talking about the rarity of instruments, I think some people have some misunderstandings on what exactly is rare and what isn't. I've run across this on several of the Facebook groups where people think something like alto flute is rare. Alto flute is not rare. I keep telling people there are more alto flutes out there than there are English horns, and orchestrally, you think English horn, that's a common everyday instrument. Alto flute, though, is super rare. No, alto flute is as common, or really more common, than English horns, because there are more flutists. The more flutists have the instrument, they're not terribly expensive for a decent one. Bass, or as I call them, tenor flutes, are not as rare as you think they are either. If you get to stuff, the really rare stuff is when you get to things like bass oboe. That's really going to be the rarest woodwind you'd ever really encounter. Wagner tuba, contrabass trombone, those get a little bit rarer. You need to go to large symphonies to be able to get those instruments. Sometimes a university might own them, but just depends on how you're defining rare. All right, we got any other questions? Hi, Juan. Oh, it must be very late over there for you. Oh, I just lost all the chat. Oh, they're back. My high school band teacher wants me to play bassoon for band next year, but I'm having a lot of problems getting low notes out. Do you have any tips? Take your instrument to a repair tech and check for leaks. That's the best thing you can do. If the low notes aren't coming out, you've got a leak somewhere in the instrument. Make sure that the whisper key is aligned. It's probably going to be somewhere in the pancake key mechanism. All right, Juan. Well, good seeing you here, and we'll talk later, okay? But yeah, if the very bottom notes on the bassoon are not coming out, you have a leak somewhere down that low. It could be something in the whisper key or pancake key mechanism. It could be in the U bend, the U tube underneath the boot cap. So without seeing the bassoon, without seeing you, I can't really offer any other advice. Get thyself to a private lesson teacher. But yeah, moving to bassoon, Thomas, always a good idea, especially if there are no other bassoons. You really need to have bassoons in there. Yeah, if the whisper key's bent, that's one of the most commonly bent keys on any woodwind instrument, just because it's so long, and a lot of older instruments don't have it supported very well, or at all sometimes. but I'm guessing that there might be other issues too, leaking pads and whatnot. How's the symphony coming? This is the printed draft score of parts 1 through 10 out of 12. It's a behemoth right now. This is like just over 200 pages. We're sitting right at like 48 minutes. And I'm just going through an editing phase right now where I'm just going through the score and making notes, changing things, putting parts in, taking parts out. I just have the finale to do, but otherwise, it's going fairly well. It's a big piece though. It's actually bigger than Symphony 2. But I'll be excited to be able to do at least a mock-up of it. I'm hoping maybe within the next 2 months at the rate I'm going. It slowed down considerably from the beginning when I started sketching it out, but that's to be expected, I think. But hopefully the symphony will be done soon enough. I'd like to go from there and move on to getting volume 3 of the textbook done. I've got a small chunk of the textbook done, and I'd like to have it. My goal is to have volume 3 of the textbook done by the beginning of February, so I can actually have it at TMEA, the Texas Music Educators Association convention in February. But that's the next big project after the symphony. Any other pieces I want to work on? Yes, I've got at least 2, maybe 3 that are in the planning stages. The big one that I will definitely be doing is a bass clarinet concerto with wind band. And I've put up a GoFundMe page to help join a commissioning consortium. That's going very slowly at the moment. I've got to get a lot more involvement on that, but the bass clarinet concerto will be one of the next big projects. I'd also, and this one may be really fun if I'm able to do it, is a young person's guide to the band where every instrument gets featured and a narrator and all that stuff. How hard do you think it'll be to get such a big long piece programmed and performed? Extremely difficult. There's only a few places that are going to be able to perform either Symphony 2 or Symphony 3. These are big statement pieces. These are not something a typical high school band is going to do. These are pieces really for your advanced college ensembles. And I'm working on setting up those connections. But obviously the big name college directors are a lot harder to get in touch with. So that's where I am. I'm working on a secret, as you would say, backdoor route to getting to know those guys. But yeah, Seth, getting big stuff like that programmed is probably one of the most difficult things I run across. Hopefully one of these days, though, because I think these are too good of pieces just to kind of sit on the shelf. In what would you consider effective double bass scoring? Okay, I'm going to assume you mean within the wind ensemble. The composer that I would suggest going to look at is David Maslanka. I actually, before he passed, when I took a few lessons from him, we talked a little bit about double bass scoring, and he was really he's really effective in how he uses the double bass within the wind band. A lot of what he does is combining the lowest double bass pizzicato with the left hand of the piano, and that's really effective. Something else that I've seen is John Mackey's soprano saxophone concerto has this great passage for pizzicato bass and lowest octave of marimba. That works really well. As well, the double bass scoring as just supporting the low woodwinds. In fact, Symphony 3 has the first time I've really ever used double bass, and I'm really experimenting around with it, just kind of figuring out how to use it and whatnot. And lot of pizzicato stuff, a lot of sustains, but there's some good stuff there. Hi, Juan. Thanks for joining us. But yeah, back to double bass. Double bass is one of those interesting things that I never. All my college ensembles actually had a double bass, but we never could hear it. So it was one of those weird situations. It's there, but it didn't make that big of an impact. And I just never thought that the pieces we played had effective parts or an effective player. Maybe I can't really say for certain. But I've heard it in professional groups where it really makes a huge impact. In fact, just last week, interview I did for the podcast. And you guys, if you don't know, I do have the new podcast out at bandnerdcast.com. But I guess last week I did a nice interview with Johann de May talking about his Fifth Symphony. And we talked actually about using cellos in the wind ensemble. And so that's an interesting thing as well. So he uses both cellos and basses, like 4 cellos and 2 basses. Any other interesting parts similar to the double bass in a band? Define interesting. That interesting means something different to everybody. Interesting to me. Again, I look at each piece individually and figure out what's interesting in that individual piece. So something like take Granger's Lincolnshire Posy, for example. To me, one of the most interesting things in there is an independent baritone part, not a euphonium part, but an actual baritone part. So he has both euphonium and baritone having very different roles. And to me, that's interesting scoring there that I'd really like to explore more. And he's expecting a true baritone and a true euphonium for those parts. And you'll have to forgive me. There we go. Any advice for someone who wants to learn to conduct? Sorry if off topic. It's not off topic. I would say that you're going to need to study with someone. Just like you take private lessons on an instrument, you need to take private lessons in conducting. I had a good friend in college who wanted to become a conductor, and he pursued everything in his power to become a conductor. To that effect, he is now a world-renowned conductor. I think last I knew he was conducting the London Symphony and some concerts. So You can do it, but all right. How should I work on developing my piano writing past improving my own piano skills? I have some ideas for solo horn work. They get lost when I try to add an accompaniment. I hate to tell you this. That's the way you develop your piano writing, is you become a better pianist. You know, that's how you be, you know, piano is one of those, you have to play it in order to write for it well. You can go and look at some of the piano works of some of the greats, Chopin, Debussy, Ravel, Scriabin, along those lines. But besides actually becoming a better pianist, I don't have an answer for you. I have a $200 Slade tenor that has chrome color, but seems to have traces of brass underneath the unpolished parts. What's it made of? It's made of brass. You have a lamp. Sorry to tell you that, but that's what it will become. But yeah, I don't know of any saxophone outside of very rare ones that are made of anything other than brass. You know, even if you see my alto sax, it's silver, but that's silver plate on top of brass. Brass is really the only metal that is workable enough and strong enough to be able to support a woodwind or brass instrument. Occasionally, you might find some out of copper, but copper is a very close relative of brass. And there might be a couple of other metals out there. Solid silver flutes, but you're not going to do a solid silver saxophone. That just gets too expensive. But I don't know of really any other metals that would be used other than brass, nickel silver occasionally, but again, I've never seen a nickel silver saxophone. I've seen pieces that use a wordless chorus. Do you think that should become more common? It depends on the piece. Wordless chorus has been in use since the early, when orchestral pieces, at least since the early 1900s. We've got pieces like Daphnis and Chloe by Ravel, Planets by Holst, and Wind Band. We've got the earliest piece I know of for wind band is Granger's Children's March. It can be effective if treated as another voice. If you're having the band members sing, that's slightly different, and it can lead to some cheesy effects. In fact, two of my pieces, High Brazil, which uses a male chorus, and The Dark Planet uses a full mixed chorus, have wordless choir parts in them. So I've used it on two occasions. It's not something that you want to overdo, though. Were saxes made out of other materials other than brass in the past? No. Going back all the way to Adolf himself, it was brass. You might find a solid silver one. You might find a nickel silver one, but those are super rare and just they're not worth the time it takes to work the materials. Flutes are a little easier because they're a straight conical or cylindrical tube. Saxophones with their complex curves are much more difficult and need a much easier metal to work with. And so brass it is. But back to a wordless chorus, I'm trying to think of if there are any band pieces that really use a wordless chorus in the way. Another great example is Debussy's Three Nocturnes. The last movement of that has this beautiful female chorus at the end. I don't know a lot of band works that are using that kind of texture, though. I think it would be something really interesting to explore, though. All right, what else we got, guys? Should I use my tenor rather than alto and marching band? I can't use the school's instrument, and it would only be me and another guy in a large band. Ask your director. Don't ask me. That is up to your director. What are some instruments you think are overwritten for? Trumpet, 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 snare drum. I think it's very doable since choirs are pretty common, right? Yes, it should be doable. I will say this though, wordless choirs actually become pretty difficult on the choir. Um, my cousin sang with the Dallas Symphony Chorus and recorded the planets with them, and the strain of that piece, the wordless choir, she said ruined her voice for like 6 months, and so it's not something you really want to do a lot for like a high school group. College, yeah, professional, definitely. In wind band or orchestra repertoire, do you think that the alto saxophones double with French horns or have unique parts more often? Well, um, so when saxophones have to have a separate part from the horns. I'm sorry, I'm not. If you send me a piece to look at and it has horns doubling the saxophones all the time, I'm going to say send it back, fix this, give the saxophone something to do, give the horn something to do. They're not the same instrument. Thoughts on DCI as a non-brass player? So I'll admit this. I went to a Carolina Crown rehearsal last week to be swayed on marching band. I thought about doing an entire video on why I hate marching band. But mostly I think that would be a clickbait video just to get more views. Come to think of it, I still might do that. Um, I appreciate the efforts that groups like that put in. I don't. It's not a medium that I want to listen to for a long period of time. Uh, I think it's more about theatrics rather than the music, and I think that's about as nice as I can say. Does playing sax give you an overbite? Got a temporary one after band camp? No. Playing sax should not be changing your anatomy. If playing saxophone is changing your anatomy, you have a bigger problem. And I'd go see a doctor, but it should not, unless you're doing something really, really, really wrong. Get yourself to a teacher. All right, what else we got? If you're going to an orthodontist for it, it means you probably had it beforehand. And honestly, I went through orthodontics as a young kid, and the orthodontist flat out told me the two instruments I could not play while I was going through it were sax and clarinet. But it should not make it worse. It's just that teeth, those are the only two instruments where teeth are directly involved. By the way, do not trust anything I say as being medical fact. I am not a medical doctor. I think I should make that disclaimer clear. Thoughts on John Mackey? he's super excited all the time. When I've talked to him, he's been very hyper. He helped out quite a bit while I was working on volume 2, and I'll be talking to him again while I'm working on volume 3 of the book. If you really want to hear what I think is Mackey's best piece, go listen to Frozen Cathedral. I think hands down it's the best thing he's done. What is one instrument that has relatively fallen out of style that hasn't seen much use in modern composition you'd like to see make a comeback? Alto clarinet? Cornet, too. So, yeah, there's no reason for this instrument to ever disappear. And cornet as well. Give me a cornet any day over a trumpet. In fact, I've written entire pieces where I don't even use trumpets. I'm sure it's been discussed before, but I was wondering what the difference between a baritone horn and a euphonium is. All right. So, if you are in the United States, 99.99% of the time, the instrument you see is a euphonium. I have in my life seen 3 true baritone horns. Everything else has been some variation flavor of euphonium. A true baritone is a narrow bore, semi-conical brass instrument that's pitched the same as a euphonium and a tenor trombone, but because it has a much narrower bore, it's going to have a much brighter sound. A lot of people say that the true baritone sounds much more like a valve trombone than it will a euphonium. And it's actually quite a bit smaller in size. It's much more compact than a euphonium will be. And like I said, in all my years being around bands, I have seen, like I said, a grand total of 3 baritones. The only place you're really guaranteed to see a true baritone is a British brass band, where they have, by definition, 2 baritone horns and 2 euphoniums. Euphonia, tenor tubas. And Juan, I can't remember exactly where you are. It might be different in your country. Valve trombone or bass trumpet. They're different instruments. What about them? Thoughts on David Maslanka? David was a sweetheart of a man. I've had several lessons with him. The volume 2 is dedicated to his memory. If you have not listened to my podcast, I highly suggest that at bandnerdcast.com. Episodes 2 and 3 are a big long interview I did with Matthew Maslanka, all about him completing his dad's final work. And I my thoughts there are really, I try and expound on that as much as possible. Thoughts on the allochrome? I can't even remember what the allochrome is. Was that the double soprano sax that they made like one of? I can't remember that one. It was one of those one-offs, I think. Written quite a bit for bass trumpet, though not in a band setting, but in a salsa setting instead of using trombones. Yeah, I can definitely see that. The first time I ever saw a bass trombone was in a bass trumpet was in a jazz setting. When did you know composing was what you wanted to do? What first got you into music? Um, so first got into music had to have been 1991, 1992, somewhere around there. Disney re-released Fantasia um, in the theaters. And so my dad took me and my sister to go see Fantasia. And at the time, that it was when the Disney Channel was still a pay premium channel, just like HBO is. They would run like a week free just as advertisement, so you could pay for this extra channel. And they were promoting Fantasia at the time, the re-release of it. And they kept showing this scene with dinosaurs. I don't know if you've noticed this, but my bookcases are covered in toy dinosaurs. I've kind of had an obsession with them since I was a little kid. Excuse me. But I wanted to go see the dinosaurs. And then I saw the orchestra. I was like, that's equally as cool. Especially the silhouette scene with the toccata and fugue, where you can just see each individual player. And so that got me interested in the instruments. It got me interested in music. And I kind of just learned from there. I got as many books as I could. This was well pre-internet. And I think one of the books I got was like the Harvard Dictionary of Music. And I just go through it and I memorize the whole dictionary of music. And I started composing really pretty early, not even knowing what I was doing. I mean, I would write out songs on notebook paper. What is your favorite instrument to write for? I don't play favorites. And I say this time and time again. I don't have a favorite anything. And this is something that as I get older, I feel pretty strongly about, is that there's no such thing as a favorite. I like different aspects, and I don't want to have one favorite over another. Ever written? Consider writing for percussion ensemble. I have not written for percussion ensemble. I absolutely would. If someone wants to commission a piece for percussion ensemble, I am all over that. I would love to do that. It would definitely be a stretch because I don't actually consider myself a great percussion writer. Percussion, I tend to take Rimsky-Korsakov's view. The percussion is just the icing on the cake. It's not the cake itself, and the icing might be cool and everything, but percussion is just the little extras, the sprinkles. But to do a whole percussion ensemble, I'm absolutely open to it. Brass instruments seem to be becoming more popular in school. Is this a new phenomenon, or does the popularity always shift between brass and woodwind? First off, does is spelled D-O-E-S, not dose, D-O-S-E. That's the English teacher me coming out. I spent 3 years as an English teacher. Sorry. I don't see it. That's up to the teacher, the band director, and how they fill out their band. It's going to be different everywhere. In my view, it should be about 60-40. 60% woodwinds, 40% brass. And the band director is the one in charge of keeping those percentages straight. Which sax should I use to develop my skills from playing the EWI? I happen to have an alto and tenor. Do you play saxophone at all, or you just have them? If you just have them, people start on alto and move to tenor. Tenor's not really one you start on. Most of the literature is going to be written for alto. By the way, sorry if I was mean about spelling. I'm just going to read exactly what you type. You can see from the books behind me, I kind of know a little bit of literature too. None of these are music books. All right, guys. We have any other questions? And it seemed to have slowed down just a little bit here. Might only go for another like 15, 20 minutes. Thoughts on alto clarinet? I own one. I have the second most viewed video on alto clarinet on the internet. I think I have spoken quite enough on alto clarinet. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to be going with a friend, and we're going to be working on a proposal to do a lecture on the use of the alto clarinet in the wind ensemble at a clarinet symposium. And so hopefully we'll be able to take that further. All right, my chat went away. How many compositions have you written so far? I have no clue. I really don't. Why is string writing arranging more difficult than wind writing? I'm a woodwind player. It's not. String writing is easier than writing for winds. If you come at it from a strictly neutral position, it's far easier to write for a string ensemble simply because all the instruments are homogeneous. They all have the same sound. Whereas if you're writing for woodwinds, you don't have the homogeneous sound unless you're writing for something like a clarinet choir. That becomes a little bit easier. I haven't owned both of them, both in my tech classes, so I have the fundamentals. EWI, yes, I know what EWI is. If I really don't, Adam, I don't really have an answer for you. I've got 6 sizes of saxophone. I use them all pretty regularly. If you really want to start building up your sax skills, get an etude book and start playing it on alto. That's the best thing I can do. Been searching for any film scores, have been originally scored for wind band, but haven't found any. Do you know of any that exist? I don't. I have never even heard of such a thing. I've thought about it. With modern Hollywood scoring practices, I know that a lot of composers aren't even using woodwinds anymore. So to just go for wind band scoring, I don't foresee that happening. It could, and like I said, I don't know of any. That doesn't mean there aren't. There might be something like experimental student films in that regard, but I don't know. All right, guys. Anything else? Not, we can go ahead and end this one a little early. Maybe get back to doing some editing here on the symphony. When writing for big band, what instrument should double up on the same chord tone? What instrument should play unisons if needed? Depends on the piece. It really does. Go find Nestico. Every time my swing band plays a Nestico chart, we automatically realize this guy knows what he's doing. Typically, the only 2 players in the wind section, not counting the rhythm section, that will really double up most of the time is bari sax and bass trombone. Everybody else really has kind of an independent part. So the other 4 saxes are together, the trombones are together, the trumpets are together. Um, what is a good balance between the different saxes in a school band? One alto, two altos, one tenor, one bari. That's all you need. Add a soprano in if needed. What are your thoughts on scoring for larger flutes like alto and bass? Perfectly fine. I score for alto flute all the time. There's this misconception that these are rare instruments. I think I talked about it at the very beginning. You may not have been here, Joseph. They're not that rare. You can find them. My first high school owned an alto flute, so it's not like it's that uncommon. And you can get a decent alto flute for like $1,200. They're a little bit quieter. You have to get a player who who's comfortable with the instrument and is able to project. There's this myth that the lower the low flutes are just going to be completely inaudible, but the alto and bass flutes are not ever going to be that soft. My state has roughly 80% alto, 15% bari, and 5% tenor. Yeah, well, everybody starts on alto. Every saxophone player has to play alto. Period. Have you ever composed or considered composing solos for certain instrumentals? What do you mean by that? I don't know what you mean by instrumentals. What about adding instruments like bass sax and contra clarinets? I score for them all the time. I've got a contra clarinet in my living room right now. Yeah, as Thomas said, you can rent an alto flute at a music store. They're not hard to get. Bass sax is, of those instruments, is probably the least common. That said, I know where I went to grad school at TCU now has two. So if they need to, they can bring out both bass sax and another bass sax, and maybe a couple bari saxes, and have this massive low range. Okay, Mason, let's get back. Have you ever composed or considered composing solos for certain instruments? Yeah, I've composed lots of solo pieces. It just depends on what I get commissioned for. Last year I did a couple. I've got a commission for one right now. I'm just holding off on completing that commission because it's for an instrument that neither the person that commissioned it nor I know exactly how it sounds. So it's a alto sarrusophone piece, and he owns the instrument, but it's not in a working state yet. So have you, when adding melodic lines for guitar / bass, should I add tabs? Are you in a concert band setting? I'm not a guitar or bass player, and I know nothing about tabs. Sorry. Have I ever been to the Sax Quest store? My only encounter with that is last time I was at TMEA, the Texas Music Educators Association convention. Sax Quest. Sax Quest had a booth there, and they brought a bunch of their instruments, including their Kano sax. And man alive, I like that instrument. I've been talking to somebody about actually writing a piece for Kano sax. We'll see how that pans out. Which country sounds more exotic to you, Morocco or South Africa? I'm thinking of playing in a marching band next year, and I'm caught between playing tenor sax or bari because I want to lose weight. Which do you think will be needed more? Ask your band director. That these questions. What should I play in the band? Ask your band director. Don't ask some dude on the internet. And if you want to lose weight, take it from someone who has done it several times. You do it through diet, not through marching band. Eat better. Mostly, eat a varied diet, mostly plants. No, there, you'll lose weight that way. Yep, I'm on my big diet right now, so I feel you there. But yeah, the only way you're going to lose weight is through diet. And don't eat vegetables, and that's basically it. Seems like I've offered nearly as much medical advice today as I have music advice. That's again, I must put out my disclaimer. Do not go to some random composer on the internet for medical advice. All right. Anybody have any other questions? We're down to about 10 people in the room. When switching from unison lines to split lines, should I notate a softer dynamic in the unison and louder on the splits, or assuming the players will know? Big band setting. Yeah. Okay. So, Tony, first off, I've actually never scored for big band. I've been playing with one now for the past couple years. So, we'll assume that there's a director. If you want the end goal of everything to be forte, right? Everybody at forte. If you want one part brought out a little bit more than the others, mark some of the players. So say you want the saxes to come out of the texture. Mark the saxes at forte, mark everybody else at mezzo forte or piano. In general, really only think two dynamics: forte, piano. Everything else is blah. Let me think about that question just a little bit more, Tony. Switching from unison lines to split lines. No, as I'm reading your question, Tony, say you're going from a unison line and then all of a sudden say you're in the sax as you split to 5-part harmony, keep the dynamic the same. The players will continue. Yeah, you might lose some of the punch of the unison line, but that's why you were scoring for a unison line. Do I make my own reads? I used to. I don't anymore. I just simply don't have the time. I've actually switched over to playing on Leger reeds. So I'm playing on the dreaded plastic reeds, but I've found out that the Leger reeds are fantastic. You prefer strict band directors over more chill ones? Always go with strict teachers. The strict teachers, believe it or not, are the ones that care about you and your education. If you have a chill teacher who's just there wants to be your friend and give you a good grade, you're not going to learn anything. Always go with the strict directors or teachers of any kind. Now, there is a limit to that. If they are so strict that they push you to want to quit, that's a little different. But if they are there, they have strict, rules, boundaries, and expectations. That's the kind of director you want. You do not want a chill director. What are your opinions about trumpets doubled? Doubled with what? www dash. I'm going to assume that you are probably freshman in high school. Would that be a safe assumption? You still haven't gotten to know your director well enough to ask him questions yet? All right, guys, I'm going to get off here at 8 o'clock my time, so another 10 minutes. So if you got any other questions, go ahead and get them out there, and we'll wrap this up here in just a few minutes. How often are concert band pieces using harp string bass? Is it becoming more common, or is it just composer's preference? Um, String bass has been around in wind bands for a long time, longer than you think. Uh, Go back to something like Mozart's Grand Partita. And yes, we can call that a wind band piece. It's 13 instruments, the 13th being the string bass. It's back to 1770, 1780s. And so that's been there the whole time. And the idea that the string bass is new is not quite right. Harp's an interesting one too. John Philip Sousa realized that when he was transcribing orchestral works, there was no way that he knew of to transcribe harp parts for the band. So when he went on tour, he actually took a harp player with him, just played the harp part as is. So harps have been there since the days of Sousa. Um, you're asking though about harp with more modern music. Yes, I know. Maslanka uses harp in most of his symphonies. Johann de May uses harp in most of his symphonies. It's becoming more and more common. What are your thoughts on calls for scores and composition competitions? Are they worth it? They're probably worth it if you win. If you don't win, they're probably not. I've never, other than one at my university, I've never entered a composition competition. I want to write the music. I don't want to write directly for a specified occasion. I have this lesson teacher who has a degree in music from great universities, but she doesn't sound that great on her instrument. She's very knowledgeable, but I don't know if I should continue lessons. Is she teaching you? Is a lot of times, a lot of times, I can't really answer that. Is she a good teacher? I don't care how she sounds. Is she a good teacher? With my first high school band directors, I never heard them play their instrument at all. Are they good teachers? Not because they didn't play their instrument. Is the cheapest Barry sax $5,000 good, or do you have to pay more to get a good one? Again, your mileage may vary. I bought my Barry sax for considerably less than that, but I got a used one. I would go used route before you go new route with saxophones every day. Find a good old Con 12M. It's a low B flat instrument, but man, those are the great instruments. If you need a low A instrument, find a used Yamaha. Do you prefer contra bassoon over bassoon? I don't play favorites. I simply don't. Fortunately, I've not been able to play contrabassoon much in the last few years simply because I don't have one. I don't have regular access to one. Each has their place, each has their purpose. Taking private horn lessons, but I really want to get better at bassoon and saxophone. Do you advise taking private lessons on multiple instruments, or should I just focus on one? Focus on one. If you're in high school, which I have to assume you are, one instrument. Get your musical skills built up on that. If you have to go to another instrument for a legit musical purpose, that's an exception. But to go from horn to bassoon, no. Is it true that low A bari sax sounds worse? No. Different models, different instruments. I have a Con 12M. That was one of the classic baris. When they started adding the low A's to bari saxes, they did not have the proportions right. So it took some R&D, research and development, to get the low A instruments where they sound great, but every bari sax produced today is a low A instrument. I think with one exception, and that is whatever the Italian make is that I cannot, P. Mariette produces a low B flat instrument, but every new bari sax produced today, other than that one, is a low A instrument. All right, guys, got time for about one or two more questions. Have you ever written anything, then you found out you accidentally plagiarized, but it sounds a little different? Do you scrap the idea or sculpt it into something that you didn't plan on? Have I written something that ends up plagiarizing? No, not that I know of. My composition process is such that I'm actually consciously taking ideas. I'm not. I'm not. Let's see if I can phrase that a little better. I'm taking ideas, not exactly melodic ideas, just texture ideas, big thoughts. But everything I do, it sounds is different enough. Synthetic reeds trigger you like they trigger my band directors and teachers. I play on Legers on as many of my instruments as I can. The Leger reeds, the synthetic, that synthetic brand is being used by some of the top players in the world. The Berlin Philharmonic clarinet section and oboes, some of the oboes are playing on Leger reeds, plastic reeds, as is Ricardo Morales of the Philadelphia Orchestra. Synthetic reeds these days, if you're going with a Leger reed, are good. In fact, they're really good. All right, guys, time for about one more question, maybe two. Yes, I think Leger double reeds are worth buying, at least the bassoon reeds. I play on a Leger bassoon reed. I switched over to that back in November, and I'm not going back to cane. It's just not worth the hassle of dealing with a cane reed. Yes, I'll do another live stream. I try and do about one of these a month. I schedule this one just out of the blue today, but yeah, I will definitely have another live stream probably sometime in August. I know that. But all right, guys. Anybody have any other last minute questions? All right. If that's the case, then I'll see you guys another day, and I'll try and make a better announcement of when I'll do the next one. All right. So thanks, guys.